So it's been about a month since you were accepted for Dakar. Has it sunk in yet that you're actually going to be there in just a couple of months?
It has, but some days I still have to like pinch myself a little bit because this has been, a lot of people talk like decide in their middle age they want to do the Dakar. For me, it's been like a childhood dream, literally since I can remember. Since 4 or 5, no, not 4. Let's say 6 years old. It's like I want to do that, and so it, in the last, I would say, 15 years, it's really, ever since I've been a grown up, it's always formed part of my life. And then I was like, okay, if I want to do this, I actually have to get going and I actually have to do it. It's just not just going to happen. So now, having that acceptance letter, and I'm sure many other people would agree, is that when you get that, if that feeling of elation is crazy. Like I was like, wow, I'm going. And like you said, it's 4 months, dude. I'm like, huh? So definitely excited, but also nervous. But it has sunk in very much.
So would you say you were expecting to be accepted so soon?
Um, I was really pushing hard to get accepted because for me, 2025 has always been the year, and I had really hoped that I can get accepted, and I think that through Decoding Dakar, what I wanted to do is I wanted to record the steps of how to get there. And I had believed that I consulted with the ASO all along the way and with my team, and I was like, okay, if we were to paint the perfect picture, how would that look? What steps should I follow? And I think you and I, we haven't spoken personally, but I went to Abu Dhabi as well, and that was on recommendation of the ASO and recommendation of the team, being like, okay, you need to do this if you want to be accepted. And I am eternally grateful that I went, because looking at the route, a lot of the riding we're going to do in the empty quarter is going to be in the same area. It'll be on the Saudi side, but the same area of the desert. So I was definitely like, nervous to get accepted. Um, and there were those nightmares with, oh, what am I going to do if I don't get accepted? So I don't know. I didn't know that I was going to 100% get accepted. I think none of us knows. But hearing that news, getting that letter was definitely a big relief, because then it changed the narrative from will or can Willem get to Dakar to Willem is going to Dakar, and that helped me mentally a lot.
So on the topic of Abu Dhabi, what was it like doing a World Rally Raid Championship race for the first time? World's experience.
Um, Honestly, I've raced rallies for since 2017 all over the world, and but I've never done a World Rally Raid Championship round. And the short answer is that it was an eye opener, um, from the level of competition. The level of competition was so high and so serious. And I feel, and one of the things a big takeaway for me from Abu Dhabi was that anybody involved in the organization would refer to any non FIM or non World Rally Raid Championship race as a amateur rally. And being at these events, I see why. I understand why there's such a big difference in approach. In Abu Dhabi, if you crashed, you had a air ambulance with two advanced life support doctors, not medics, by your side within 12 minutes. In many cases, the organization would know that you've crashed before you crashed, before you knew you crashed, because of all the instruments on the bike. So to put that in perspective, in New York, it would take an ambulance or a 911 call 15 minutes to get to you, and in London, it's longer. So what that does is it allows us, and also with the airbags, it allows people to push much, much harder. For myself, I was in a very interesting position because I am not a professional racer, but I'm also not an amateur. I'm in this no man's land, in this gray area between a professional and an amateur. And that did put me in a weird position because I wasn't in Abu Dhabi to race. I was in Abu Dhabi to finish and to qualify. And like one of my teammates, USA to podium. He's like, I'm here to podium. I will accept the risks, which I wouldn't. I have a wife, I have a family, I have a daughter. I wanna. I'm not. I don't care about the podium. I care about the process and about finishing. And I think the biggest difference for me between FIM and any other race was that, in that case, you're in the minority. If you go to any other race, we're all there for the camaraderie. We're all there for the experience of rally. Whereas if you're in a Rally Raid Championship round, you're there to compete. And it's a question of why are you here if you're not willing to push the limits. So that was an eye opener for me. But at the same time, I learned so much. There's so much collective experience at these races. There's people that's been racing 20 years. One of my teammates has completed Dakar in every conceivable category: car, bike, quad, side by side, and truck. That's experience. That kind of experience. When do you get to spend time with somebody like that, like just for experience sake? So it was a very, very interesting experience, not something I was used to, but I'm also glad that I did, because now I have a much better frame of reference for Dakar.
Given that Abu Dhabi was mostly in desert, how different was it compared to what you're used to riding here in the deserts here in like North America or wherever?
Yeah, so for the readers or listeners, I do spend a lot of time in South Africa, and then I spend a lot of time in the US and in Mexico. I'm the race director for the Baja Rally. And given that I knew Abu Dhabi would be 100% sand and dunes, so I trained for it. I prepared for it very specifically. But and I was ready for it, so that was fine. But no amount of training can prepare you for the vastness of the empty quarter. It is insane. And then there is nothing. I think that was the biggest thing for me. Is like, you come over a dune and you come over a dune and you come over a dune, and every time it's literally an ocean of sand, and there's nothing. There's not a town. There's not people. There's not even camels. And it was really nice to know that the organization knows where you are at all times. But at the same time, I wish I had time to stop and take photos and be like, wow, I'm here. Like that. That is the only negative thing of Abu Dhabi, is I never got time to take pictures. But it is a sea of sand. Abu Dhabi specifically, the racing there is famous for being dangerous for two reasons. Number one, the drops of the dunes are pretty severe, and they never stop. After day four, the drops were so intense that at some point I was like, when does this stop? Because it feels like all that's happening is I'm going down. When am I going up? So the blind dunes are insane in Abu Dhabi. And then the other thing in Abu Dhabi that was interesting is that and again, I've been cautioned by that before I went, so I knew what to expect. But the sand consistency in Abu Dhabi changes consistently. So you have red sand, you have white sand, you have yellow sand, and they all work differently. And you would go through the different types of sand at least 2 or 3 times a day. So you could never really trust the bike or the sand, because it kept on changing underneath you. So that was interesting. Very, very interesting. But honestly, I really loved it. I really enjoyed getting to know and understand a little bit more about racing in the Middle East. And to me, that was amazing. Like learning about the culture, understanding a little bit more about how the United Arab Emirates work, and meeting local people there. They were so friendly and so happy to just have people there, that it was a really special experience. So it wasn't just the dunes I wasn't surprised by the dunes. Let's say that it wasn't the dunes that impressed me. It was also the people, and the culture really, really impressed me. It was really fun.
Now, even though finishing was your main goal rather than like trying to finish well, did you feel like any sort of pressure to do well, knowing that was your main shot to be accepted for Dakar?
No. And you know what? That was a very interesting thing that happened because I'm personally I'm very good at deciding on a goal and sticking to it. And I would say that I had ridden on purpose well below my capabilities because I wanted to get finished and not get injured. That so my personal goals for Abu Dhabi was finish without penalties, which unfortunately in the very first speed zone I got a 1 minute penalty because I didn't hear the ERTF buzzer. So that shot that, but I got no waypoint penalties or anything else. So that was the first thing. The second thing was to not crash. I did have one crash where I literally just lost concentration for 5 seconds, which really highlights how dangerous the riding in the dunes are. Like literally over 5 days, I lost concentration for 5 seconds. I know exactly why I crashed. And it was just that was how intense it was that you couldn't stop focusing. So at some point during the race, there was a conversation that because again, I'd consulted the ASO and I was like, listen, guys, what's the deal at Abu Dhabi? Do I just have to finish or do I have to finish well? And they were like, you have to finish. And then in the middle of the race, listening to other riders, everybody's talking about speed and pace. And while to your question, I didn't feel pressure. I went into the race with the mindset that all I have to do is finish. And now I got there and everybody's like, ooh, you have to go faster, you have to go faster. So at that point, I did feel a little bit anxious because I was like, well, I thought we just have to finish. And now you're telling me I have to go faster. Why? And at that point, I decided to stick to my plan and not because of racing through the years. I've learned to stick with my plan rather than listening to other people. But there was definitely not pressure as much as a little bit of being a little bit anxious because I was worried that I might not go fast enough. The difference in Abu Dhabi to other races, and this is conjecture, I cannot state this as fact, is Abu Dhabi did have cutoffs, right? They had very strict, you have a minimum time to do a stage in. So my interpretation of that is that the ASO or Dakar, the organizers, implement these cutoffs as that is your max time, because if you cannot make it in the max time, you're not going to be able to do Dakar. So for me, the max time was like, okay, that's all that I respected and worried about. And I kind of tried to drown out the noise, which was difficult because, as I said, the level of competition was pretty high. Um, a lot of people were gunning for the ASO has a rule, I'm sure you know about that, for the point system, that if you make it in 1.5 times, so 1.5 times slower than the fastest guy, you do get extra points towards Dakar. So a lot of people were pushing for that. For me, because I had a lot of points from other races, I was okay just finishing. And again, it's my theory that because in Dakar you don't have a cutoff for the end of the stage, you just have to finish. So I believe that they implement the cutoff in Abu Dhabi to be a natural selector, and therefore, and I finished well within the cutoff. Like most days, I finished 1 to 2 hours before the cutoff. So I was always happy with that. I think I would have been a little bit more stressed if I finished on the cutoff times.
Now, speaking of the application process and all that, with how convoluted it all seemed at first glance, hence why you're doing Decoding Dakar, would you say that now that you're experiencing yourself, the process isn't as confusing as you expected, or is it still kind of messy at times?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think it would be difficult for me to answer honestly because I've been involved in Dakar, or not involved, but been following it for so long. I think that the application process in itself, I think, is not too difficult. I think I mean, I'm talking about submitting your application as opposed to the journey. And I think that I was extremely happy and just impressed with how much care the ASO takes with potential applicants. You know, there's a direct connection. I spoke to Ronan Valverde, which is the competitor relations officer, a lot. I met him in Ensenada personally. We spoke. And I really felt that they really take care in helping you through the process and by making it very transparent as to what you need to do. So I do think that initially it feels a bit messy, and then as the process evolves, it gets easier.
So even then, like, if you're the ASO, like, what changes would you make to the programs if you could, personally?
Wow. I would have to think about that. That's a difficult one. I think that um, the the flow of the website, I think, is a big thing. I think that if let's say I could like have a magic wand and I could be in charge, I think what a good way to do it would be to say we have a first time Dakar entry portal, which is almost like a separate website for first timers. And then anybody else that has done Dakar before, you go to this website. And that would kind of, I think, declutter a lot of it. But, you know, on balance, the ASO, I think, do a really good job at putting it in place. And I mean, in all fairness, Dakar's been running since 1979, so or 78. They're the gold standard in the process. So I don't think that I can really criticize it that much. But I would say that a separate portal for Dakar first timers might be a good idea. That would be my constructive criticism, but I don't want it to come over like I'm dissing their process.
So once you get this upcoming Dakar out of the way, do you plan on continuing decoding Dakar?
Yes, I my plan would be for the readers that don't know about what Decoding Dakar is, you know, there's this. I spoke to somebody today that says, you know, for 50 people he knows that said that they're going to go to Dakar 2, it made it. And you know, in my personal experience, that's very similar. So many people tell me I'm going to do Dakar, and then they don't. And that was very important for me, that when I say I'm going to go and do Dakar, and that's where the pressure for qualifying came in. I wanted it to be, yes, I'm going. So I think for me, the legacy of what I want to achieve with Decoding Dakar is we will, after Decoding Dakar, we will have a website running. And that website, I would like to become the go-to place for people preparing for Dakar. And the way that I put it on my website is that it would be a roadmap. So if you are really serious, like truly serious about Dakar, these are the steps to follow. This is how much it'll cost you, and this is how you go about it. And it would kind of just be like putting what I'm documenting this year into an easy, digestible format that people can just go to and at a glance see the steps, see the timelines, and hopefully that will help other riders get there. You know, that's my goal. That's what I want to achieve this year.
Right. So looking ahead to January, what are your thoughts on the route for 2025 and all the new rules and features they're adding?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. The biggest thing for me is the penultimate, second to last 480-kilometer dune stage. I think that um, that keeps me up at night now, even already before I'm going, because for me it was having been to Abu Dhabi. You know, in Abu Dhabi, our stages were 250 to 280 kilometers, and it was tough. It was really hard. Having been to Namibia, racing or riding in Namibia, I can now say with 100% confidence, 480 k's in the dunes is a is going to be a insane challenge. On a good day, to do that on the second to last stage of Dakar, when your bikes and your bodies are done, I am like, I get goosebumps just talking about it, because it's like, I can't not finish that stage. So I think putting it in where they're putting in the second to last stage is one of those really scary things. Whereas in the past, it was a question of, you have to make it to the rest stage or rest day. Then after rest day, you're going to make it to the finish. That's always been the Dakar recipe. Now it's, you have to make it through the race stage, and then you have to make it through the second to last stage, and then you can finish. And that's really intimidating. So I think that's number one. I'm very excited for the chrono stage. I really, with Dakar being in one single country, it's something that I've never really, like, I had wished that when I do Dakar, it can traverse borders again. I like Dakar to be a multi-country race, and I just realized that that's not going to happen anytime soon, so I might as well do it. But with it being a single country race, I think doing the stuff like the chrono stage is going to put us back on the track of the Dakar of old, making people more equal, bringing it back to the roots. And I think that, this chrono stage, they're talking about 950 kilometers over 2 days. It is going to be mixed terrain. It's not going to be just dunes like it was last year. So that stuff, all of the changes I'm excited about. I'm very, very excited about the split course on 5 stages. We're not having cars and trucks behind us. As the bikers would know, that's your worst nightmare, is once those trucks catch you, it's really, really difficult to ride. So I think every biker really welcomes the changes of the split courses. But yeah, I would say that big oh, and the mass, I don't know if it's mass or mass, but the mass start in the last stage, that's going to be fun as well. I think that again throws us back into the Dakar of the 80s. So that will also be super exciting.
So what would you say is your main goal for Dakar? Like, is it like Abu Dhabi where it's just a finish, or is there more to it?
Yeah. Well, there is more to it. I think for me, I train people to go to Dakar. I train people how to navigate. I always say that I am not a trained motorcycle rider instructor, because I'm not. I half the time I just survive on the bike. I'm not a qualified racer. What I know, I've learned by riding bikes. And that's very different to somebody, especially like in the US, that grows up desert racing their whole life, So and that's part of why I love rallies, that, you can have an edge if you can navigate. And with navigation, that is my forte. And I've trained and taught many people that had finished Dakar, who did their first road books with me, and I've never gone. So I think it's very important that finishing is one of those things to kind of just cement me in my position as a somebody that trains people, that I want to have the Dakar tick behind my name. But more so, this is, like I say in the beginning, it's a lifelong journey for me. So for me, it is to have fun. It's as everybody that's reading this would know, that, this is, it's my life savings. It's everything that I've worked for. So if I'm not going to have fun, there's no point in doing it. So number one is to have the best time of my life while making sure that I finish. And wherever I finish, I finish. I've seen so many people's Dakars been destroyed by having an idea, thinking they should be top 70 or top 80 or top 50 or top 30, it doesn't matter. And then they get to Dakar and they're not close to where they thought they were going to be. And I've witnessed firsthand how that destroyed, like, Dakars for friends of mine, where they just didn't enjoy it because they were so upset by where their position. So I think that for this year, it's to finish. If I go back, then I can have if I go back, I would have a reference. If I finish top 50 or top 100 or top 80, it doesn't matter. I know going back that, okay, now I know what bracket I fall in under Dakar terms. And then I can have a clearly defined goal of saying, okay, if I finish top 80, next one I want to finish top 70. But for my first Dakar is to enjoy it and to make lifelong memories.
So in order to get there, like, what are the expenses going to be like, and how do you plan to cover it?
Well, so that's a big part of Decoding Dakar. My go-to number for anybody that is playing the serious game is $100,000 US. You can certainly do it for cheaper. However, because I have one shot at it, I decided to play the game of minimizing my risk of not finishing. And for me, that was very important because I want to make sure that I've done everything possible so that if I don't finish, that's not because of something that was in my control. So while you could probably do it cheaper, I think a realistic number is $100,000. And I know it sounds like a lot of money, and it's not something that makes sense. People would be like, how can you spend $100,000 on a race? And it doesn't, but it's like with anything that is a passion or a drive, it doesn't make sense. It's something that it's part of you that you just have to do, and people spend money on other things that sometimes doesn't make sense. So realistically, I'm planning to cover it through savings, but also fundraising. There was a lot of added expenses and stuff that I didn't necessarily think about. Abu Dhabi, I did not budget for because I had believed that I had enough money to cover everything, and then Abu Dhabi came up. And so I was like, okay, you should do Abu Dhabi. So I was like, okay, if they're telling me to do it, I should do it. But at the same time, I didn't plan for that in my budget. So the fundraising effort will be there's three ways basically. Well, more than three, but the one is we have our like if there's anybody in any sphere for corporate sponsorship, that obviously we're open to, and I would love to find somebody to support me in that in any brand. But if the chances of that happening is always quite small if you're an amateur. So the other side then is to go the crowdfunding route. And by saying that, the value we contribute is Decoding Dakar, as we're bringing Decoding Dakar to the world, and we hope that people can appreciate that by donating. So I have a GoFundMe, but over and above the GoFundMe, we will be selling very unique T-shirts that is designed by a very upstanding artist in South Africa, and he's making a special Decoding Dakar limited T-shirt for Dakar. They won't be cheap, but I feel that if you're not buying a shirt, you're supporting Decoding Dakar, and because of that, you're kind of getting a shirt because you're supporting. And then lastly, and that's something that I'm very excited about, we're still working on it. It's not 100% finished yet, but that is to have a Dakar quiz competition where we will have a really, really big prize. I'm talking a prize in excess of $10,000, where it'll be a collection of really high-end motorcycle products. And you will buy a ticket to compete in the event. And the event it'll be normal Dakar questions and trivia, but also then there would be predictions as along Dakar. A simple example is, what do you think, what stage is going to be the most difficult for me? What stage do you think I'm going to enjoy the most? What is going to be the maximum temperature during Dakar this year? What's going to be the toughest stage? All of that stuff we will roll into it, and we'll make it a interactive thing where people can take part throughout Dakar. And then after Dakar, we'll draw the winner. So those are the fundraising efforts at the moment. And anybody that's reading this, if they can support me, literally every single dollar helps everyone.
All right. So before we wrap this up, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I would like to thank you, man. I think that it's really, really, really important that people like you get the word out, and the work you guys do are often overlooked because people are just always like they read something and they just think it happened to be there. As journalists, and for me, I have a deep appreciation for the work you do because at rallies you are always the first guys that's up, and you're always the last guys that go to bed. And you are our mouthpiece to the world. Very few rally or sports people are good at social media or good at these type of things, and without you guys we wouldn't be able to get our message out there. So personally, I would just like to thank you for doing what you're doing, and helping us share the word of rally, because without you guys nobody would even know about us. So